Okay, in the great Swiss tradition, we're going to start on time. And I'm Anton Pozniak. I'm the immediate past president of the IES. I'm a consultant physician at Chelsea and Westminster in London, as well as a professor at the School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine there. So it's with great pleasure, as my role as non-industry co-chair of the Industry Liaison Forum, to open this third and last round table, which is going to focus on accelerating access to long-acting HIV prevention and treatment formulations and delivery platforms, challenges and opportunities. And this is done in collaboration with the Medicines Patent Pool. Now, this round table is going to discuss critical enablers that are needed to expedite access to at-scale manufacturing and supply of long-acting formulations for HIV prevention and treatment. And it concludes the contributions of generic manufacturers. Now, we are planning to co-host a satellite session at the upcoming AIDS 2022 conference in Montreal. It's going to dive deeper into this topic and provide a brief overview of the round table that we've had on session 1 and 2. Now, the program of this session is available if you go to the AIDS 2022 website or through the link that will appear shortly in the chat. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping rules for the round table. Obviously, you know, it's been recorded. We've had that voice that we always get, and the recording will be made available to the participants and on the IAS website as part of educational materials in the coming weeks. But by staying in this meeting, I hope you consent to being recorded for this portion of the roundtable. Now, we do encourage you to send questions to our presenters at any time through the chat function, which is, as you know, in Zoom, bottom of your screen, and they'll be addressed during the panel discussion and throughout this roundtable. And when you do send the questions, obviously, can you focus them on today's roundtable theme? Now, I'd also like to emphasize that the ILF, the Industry Liaison Forum, aims to provide stakeholders involved in the HIV response with a neutral platform to foster dialogue and action along the HIV prevention, diagnosis and care continuum. Now, we might not find answers to all challenges today, but it's an important step forward in improving access to long-acting HIV technologies. So before starting, I'd like to pass the mic to my co-chair, Helen McDowell, for a brief introduction. Helen.
Thanks, Anton. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Apologies, I've not got my video on. I've got a few technical challenges today, so hopefully, though, that you can hear the audio clearly. So as Anton said, my name's Helen McDowell, and I head up Government Affairs and Global Public Health at ViiV Healthcare. But today I'm here with you in my capacity as the industry co-chair of the Industry Liaison Forum. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today to explore and discuss the opportunities and the challenges in ensuring access to accelerated access to long-acting HIV technologies. A warm welcome to all of the participants today and all of the guest presenters who are shown on the screen in front of you. The way we're going to run it today, so there will be some presentations that have been recorded and they will be followed by a panel discussion. Please do post clarifying questions and contribute in discussing the challenges and opportunities on this topic. It is a packed agenda, but we do very much want to make sure there is lots of engagement from all of you with us. We ask you not to interrupt the speakers and also to ask our speakers to remain within the allocated time slots, because we do want to get to that critical discussion at the end. Each of the speakers do have detailed biographies and they can be found in a link that will magically appear for you in a moment in the chat. And so if you want to find out more about any of them, please do have a look and connect. And with that, we're going to start off with a setting the scene section, as you can see on the agenda in front of you. Within this first section, our first speaker is Rajesh Murthy, who is the Head of Alliance Management and the Indian operations at the Medicines Patent Pool. Rajesh is going to present some lessons learned from scaling up access to ART and the foreseen challenges with long-acting technologies. Following Rajesh, we will see a presentation by Lilian Moreko, who is the Executive Director and founding member of the International Community of Women Living with HIV in Eastern Africa. And Lilian will provide the community expectations on what needs to happen to ensure accelerated access of long-acting technologies. And then the last presentation in this first section, we'll hear from Kate Rademacher, who works at FHI 360 as a senior technical advisor. She's going to present and share lessons with us from the longer-acting contraceptive scale-up and rollout.
Thank you to the co-chairs for the kind introduction. MPP was founded in 2010. It's a United Nations-backed public health organization, and our mission is to increase equitable access to innovative, quality-assured essential medicines and health technologies in the low and middle-income countries through public health-oriented voluntary licensing and tech transfer. In the past 3 years, we have successfully implemented a model for the infectious disease areas, and now we have expanded to include any health technology that could contribute to the global response in COVID-19, as well as patented essential medicines included in the WHO EML. We are fully funded by UNITAID, the Swiss government, and the Japanese and French governments. As of today, our MPP's mandate includes infectious diseases, that still remains the core area, non-communicable diseases, COVID-19, tech transfer, and long-acting technologies. Now let's take a look at the MPP model and how have we fared so far with HIV licensed products. Once the treatment needs are identified by our dialogues and discussions with the disease experts and civil society and patient groups, we then work closely with the WHO to prioritize medicines and forecast the future uptake. After that, we negotiate the voluntary license with the patent holders. And once that's done, we sub-license it to the generic manufacturers via a comprehensive expression of interest process, by which once the medications are developed and commercialized, are available for the people living in LMICs. And the key feature of this is the licensing term allows the sale of low-cost versions, highest quality possible because they're all approved by stringent regulatory authorities, and the new treatments are available at a very low cost for the people living in these countries. Now, in terms of the coverage that we have had, which are HIV licensed products, let's take a look quickly at this map. The dark blue shaded countries are those which currently have access to MPP's licensed products, and this number is 130. And with this access, 99% of the people living with HIV in LMICs are covered by MPP's licensed product. Moving further towards the impact that we have created so far in terms of uptake, economic, and health indicators, we have signed voluntary licensing agreements with 15 patent holders and sub-licensed it to 55 generic manufacturers, by which MPP's licensed products today are available in 148 countries. 26.91 billion doses of treatment have been supplied, equivalent to 71.76 million patient years of treatment. And that has led to a savings of $1.2 billion, and 18,000 deaths have been averted from 2010 to December 2021. It is further projected that by 2030, the MPP licensing model would help in saving $3.5 billion and 160,000 deaths could be averted. Now, these are provisional numbers and are currently under validation by KPMG, but should be soon available on our website. It's very important also to understand what's the model that's been used for these impact numbers, and a presentation of that would be presented by my colleague Sebastian Moring in the upcoming AIDS 2022 conference. Now, how could MPP achieve these numbers? That's the big question. So license management is something which plays a very, very important role here, especially working closely with the patent holders as well as the generic manufacturers. MPP plays an important part in encouraging and monitoring the country registrations and sales, offering technical and regulatory support to our generic manufacturers, which sometimes also helps them in terms of the market and industry analysis, by which they're able to accelerate their product development. And any new scientific guidelines or updates that have been released are shared immediately with the generic manufacturers to keep them updated. And of course, all of this has to be done in the right way. And that's where MPP also plays an important role in ensuring that these licensed products are not diverted from the LMICs to any other non-licensed territory. So far, we have delivered in hepatitis C as well as HIV, and now it's important to understand how is MPP going to play a role in the long-acting space. We have signed 2 new licenses in the last year. In September, we signed an agreement with Tandem Unlimited for University of Liverpool's UNITAID-funded Project Longevity. And this is for malaria chemoprophylaxis, TB prevention, and Hep C cure. In December 21, we signed an agreement with the University of Washington for a long-acting injectable HIV drug combination technology, which in this case is TLD. And if this is developed and safe to use, it will significantly reduce the pill burden since it's being developed as a subcutaneous monthly injection. And of course, you must have read the news where MPP is currently actively negotiating with Viv Healthcare for the cabotegravir long-acting injectable for HIV PrEP. Lastly, I also wanted to let you know about this LAPAL database, which is the long-acting technologies patents and license database. It's a free tool which would allow the global health community to monitor the patent landscape for long-acting technologies. Now, the big question here is, how would MPP's licensing model be successful in the long-acting space? And for that, it's very important to understand the challenges that comes along with these technologies. First is the uptake, or trying to map the demand for such product in LMICs, especially when it comes to PrEP. And the second is, the complexity of these formulations, especially in terms of technical development as well as the regulatory pathways. But we are confident that with our understanding we have with generic manufacturers and the working experience that we have had over the many years, we're sure that the generic manufacturers would be able to deliver these licenses also in the future. So with that, I would like to conclude my talk, and now I hand over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To begin with is to say how excited we are and how we feel as communities that we are talking about long-acting formulations, because we know that people who use these products have got lots of preferences, and therefore it provides for choice and options. That to the extent that, for example, in many instances, and we've learned a lot from the ECHO trial, we've learned a lot from use of Depo-Provera by women, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, as they deal with family planning, that there are lots of structural barriers. There are also individual challenges. We have had a lot around stigma and discrimination, but also when you talk about generally access to prevention and care and treatment services, we know that there's a lot of stigma and discrimination. One other issue that has come up and that continues to come up is the peer burden, but also we know that particularly women and adolescent girls and young women in Africa face a lot of violence as a result of accessing prevention and treatment and care services. And therefore, when we have products that are going to provide a long-term period of access whereby people don't need to be getting into facilities or where they access these services, we believe that this is going to contribute for a long period of time in terms of addressing some of the challenges, that we are going to see an increase in adherence and retention, and that we are going to see better quality services in terms of how people are able to prevent HIV, but also how they are able to access care and support services. And therefore, this is very, very important and a welcome way of a 21st century access to services that are long-term. So having said that, I think some of the critical areas that we need to look at in terms of access rotate around, for example, the price. The question that, for example, we are already now struggling with is, are these products going to be accessible? That even when we're excited that now we are seeing them, but will the price allow for the accessibility? And therefore we need to work around how do we make the price that is really affordable, that our countries and our governments are going to be able to come up with guidelines that allow for their introduction. Because one of the challenges that, for example, we already know and we are facing is that our countries are hesitant to even come up with guidelines for use of these long-acting products, because the price is exorbitant, and therefore they are using that even maybe as an excuse not to move to that direction. And therefore price must be affordable. And how do we make price affordable? But also we know that, for example, where I come from, we depend on donors like PEPFAR, like Global Fund, and therefore the donors must be convinced enough that these products are going to be within reach and that they are within their budgets. And therefore we need to work around the price so that the price is affordable, because it is challenging and it is unacceptable that we go through research, we get these products, you know, people have participated in research and the products are here, and then at the end of the day, they cannot be accessible just because of a product. And therefore we need, because of a price, and therefore we must work around ensuring that the price is affordable. And if we must get generics of these products, then we must have it. But then how do we get to that? I think one other way for access to happen is that the communities, civil society must be engaged at all levels so that they understand where we are coming from, where we are. And if it means to advocate, then they are able to advocate for these services to make sure that they are within reach and they are accessible. Short of that, it becomes difficult. And when we talk about community engagement, what do we mean? We mean that communities must be engaged, and we are talking about communities in all their diversity, and they must be involved at all levels of, you know, at all levels of implementation, development of the product, monitoring, and giving feedback. And that means that it has to be part and parcel of a process that has been accepted. And it is also important that these communities are not only engaged because they must be engaged and that we must tick a box, but that the engagement is well thought through, it is long-term, and that they are engaged as equal partners, as advisors and as collaborators. And therefore there must be a plan of engagement of communities. And we feel that that can also help us address some of the issues that we are seeing and that we are likely to see, like I talked about the price. When you have civil society engaged, when you have communities engaged, they'll be able to push to make sure that the price is affordable and that the products are within reach. I think the other thing that is important around access, there has to be transparency, which many times is not seen and is not happening. We need to have some kind of transparency to understand, for example, if we are talking about the price, if we are talking about a product that probably is going to be beneficial to one category of community and not the others, there has to be a clear communication around that as to why, for example, if, let's say we are talking about the ring, if it has been seen to work for adolescent girls and women and in sub-Saharan Africa or in Africa, for example, why shouldn't it be approved by, and why can't it be used? And why, for example, would PEPFAR not pay for that if we know that it's going to work for this category of people? So transparency is going to be very critical and important. And of course, when we talk about transparency, we are talking about, again, be open about the price. What is this product? What is the price of this product? Why is it so expensive? And how long can it take how long will it take us to reduce the price? And if we are not able to reduce the price, what are other mechanisms that are available to make sure that the product is accessible to people? And I think for us, the last point that I would want to bring to this meeting is that there's not going to be an easier way of getting these products to where they need to be, but that the beneficiaries must be given full information, they should be given knowledge, and that they must demand. So there has to be demand creation, and the demand creation must come from the beneficiaries of the services. And therefore, it requires that we recruit as many community people, beneficiaries, recipients of these products as much as we can, so that it is in their hands, that they know these products are there, they are available, but maybe they cannot be accessible. You cannot access them, and we leave it in their hands to make sure that they demand. So there has to be a lot of work to make sure that there is demand creation. For example, if we are talking about the dapivering vaginal ring, if we are talking about Kabla, we must bring key populations on board. We must bring adolescent girls and young women on board so that they create that demand, so that they show the world, the communities, the donors, the researchers, the governments where we come from, that we cannot just get products done because people participated in research, they gave in their bodies, and now we have products, but they are not able to access them. So the demand creation must be all continuous, because we demanded that we needed these products. The products are here, and therefore we must demand that they are accessible and in use by the communities.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Kate Rademacher, and I'm a Senior Technical Advisor at FHI 360. I'm really delighted to be here with you today to share lessons from the introduction and scale-up of long-acting contraceptives. So as many of you may know, there have been several substantial efforts recently to do global market-shaping efforts for long-acting contraceptive products. I have worked on several of these initiatives, and so I've been really privileged to have sort of a front row seat to that, specifically on work on contraceptive implants and the hormonal intrauterine device, which you can see pictured here. There have also been a lot of work to expand access to contraceptive injectables, namely DMPSC, which has the potential for self-administration. So there are a lot of exciting lessons learned that, across these three methods that I think will be interesting and applicable to this group. So what I'm going to do is take you through 5 lessons learned. The first one, I think, will not be a surprise to this audience, and I know that resonates in many ways in the HIV space. So what we've really learned in family planning is that it's critically important to have multiple quality assured suppliers per method category. Having multiple quality assured suppliers, of course, can help ensure affordable pricing as well as adequate supply. And so I'd like to give you a little bit of a deep dive here around some of our experience with contraceptive implants. So for a number of years, I worked on the Sino Implant Initiative, which is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and led by my colleague, Dr. Marcus Steiner. So what we did through that project is we worked for over a decade to help a generic supplier based in China, Dawa Pharmaceuticals, to bring their 2-rod contraceptive implant to global markets. And at the outset of the product was extremely affordable. You can see here in the orange bar the price of Sino implant, which is now sold as Levoplant globally. But the product was not quality assured. So we worked for many years with the manufacturer to work towards WHO pre-qualification, which was achieved several years ago. So in the meantime, what was happening was some countries started to introduce Sino implant even in advance of the product being WHO pre-qualified. At the same time, concurrently, there was a lot of effort to try to bring down the prices of quality assured implants, including Jadel, a 2-rod implant, and Implanon/Nexplanon, a 1-rod implant. And at the outset of this initiative, the price of Jadel and Implanon/Nexplanon was really prohibitively expensive for procurement for the public sector in low and middle income countries. And there was a lot of effort. There were multiple stages of this, but efforts to bring down the price. And ultimately, a volume guarantee was negotiated. And I think one of the sort of lesser known parts of the story, that the implant experience is lesser known, but really, I think that this graphic shows a striking reality that as the price was negotiated, it's the same price as essentially as the price for Sino implant / Levoplant was. And so again, the power of another supplier coming into the market and being a place, to increase opportunities for affordable pricing and transformation in the market, as well as expanding supply. So this is really an exciting part of the legacy of that project and the impact of Levoplant globally. As I mentioned, so I'm going to talk about the second insight now. So volume guarantees clearly have the potential to transform markets, and particularly to affect pricing. And so, really so exciting, the story of what's happened with implants. You can see here from the article on the left, Implants are now a substantial part of the method mix in many countries. The word liftoff, the blossoming of contraceptive implant use in Africa, really says it well. In addition, there have been a lot of efforts to increase affordable pricing for DMPA-SC, which is marketed as Cyanopress. And again, similarly, global efforts to do market shaping and to increase affordability and then accessibility at the country level. So in both cases, volume guarantees have had a really positive impact in many ways, but there can be unintended consequences. And we learned that with the level plant experience. So as I mentioned, for several years, Cyanoimplant, again, known then as Cyanoimplant, now as level plant, was being introduced in several countries, but was not yet WHO pre-qualified. At the same time, the volume guarantee was being negotiated for Jadel and Nexplanon. So there was really a question when the generic supplier achieved WHO pre-qualification, would there be market share left for them? And, in the meantime, would the market that they already had sort of dry up in the face of the volume guarantee? So I think that one thing that's really important for this group to be thinking about is if volume guarantees are on the table, are there potential consequences for the generic suppliers that may not be fully appreciated at the outset? The other lesson it learned on this slide that I would share is that it's really important to include procurement groups as volume guarantees are being negotiated. Sometimes there can be a disconnect with the donors or other actors that are negotiating the terms of a volume guarantee and the actors that are going to end up actually buying the product and supplying it to programs. And so it's really important to make sure that the procurement agencies are right up front at the table and involved with all of those discussions early and often, as well as, of course, the decision making. All right, insight 3. So I'm going to pivot now and talk more about the hormonal intrauterine device. So I lead a project called the LEAP Initiative, which is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as a portfolio of activities funded by USAID, intended to evaluate the potential for expanded access to the hormonal IUD in low-income countries. So at the outset of this initiative, there was other funding from USAID, and a number of projects were funded to do research, including ours. And I think what there's often a temptation to do is for projects to go off and collect data, pilot studies, implementation research, et cetera, and not compare lessons learned and data across projects and countries. Of course, we try to do this, but we aren't always successful. And so one of the things we did in the Hormonal IUD Access Group is we developed a shared learning agenda. And so if you refer to this paper, we have priority questions, which then we aligned on. And not only that, importantly, we aligned on research methodologies. So that included at the granular level of wording of research of, questions that were being asked, either in enhanced M&E settings or as part of research, rigorous research studies. And so that really helped us at the end when we were trying to compare across countries and settings to have some of those similar questions and data collected in similar ways. And so that really helped us as a community look across the settings and start to really understand similarities, commonalities, and trends, which then pave the way for additional successes, which I'll share on the next slide. So next insight, the power of high trust partnerships. And when I first drafted this slide, I just used the phrase, the power of partnership, but then I added the word high trust, because that's really been the lesson learned for us, that you actually need to have real trust, not just lip service to trust. And of course, building trust, sustaining trust, cultivating trust takes intentionality, and it takes, sometimes a sacrifice on mutual parts, or, honest conversations, acts of good faith, etc. In the case of the hormonal IUD, the access group that has formed, again, that's a consortium of donors, suppliers, implementing partners, researchers, and country governments, has really been, in my career, an example of really high trust collaboration. And I'm very pleased to tell you that after a lot of work, again, on a shared learning agenda, on a coordinated supply and demand side intervention package, I would say, we are in 2021, for the first time in 30 years, the hormonal IUD was added to the USA and UNFPA catalogs at an affordable price for the public sector. For those of you who don't know, the hormonal IUD was originally introduced in Europe in 1990 and in the US in 2000. So this really represented a 30-year plus research to access gap. And so this incredible milestone of 2 quality assured hormonal AD products, long acting, being added to the USAID and UNFPA catalogs is a really incredibly exciting milestone. And again, having Bayer Pharmaceuticals and Medicines 360 a part of the 2 suppliers, a part of the consortium, and building that trust was really an important part of this journey. So this is my last insight, and I'll just say that again, you saw on the first slide 3 methods, 3 long-acting methods that we've been working hard to introduce. And you can see on the left side here, some of you may be familiar with the high impact practices, or HIPs, in contraception. We just published a new strategic planning guide for how to support contraceptive method introduction. Some of the lessons learned and points there may be highly of interest. So you can see the URL at the bottom of the screen if you want to check it out. But just one of the things that we've been talking a lot about as a community is that there can be product introduction fatigue when you're introducing multiple methods sort of, not in a coordinated fashion. So some of you may be familiar with the SEMA reproductive health platform, which has just recently been launched. And part of the vision for that group is to address this problem so that we're less looking at, method by method by method, but rather trying to look across markets and countries and have a more coordinated approach. So stay tuned about lessons learned from that initiative. So that's my final insight, but I'm going to give you one bonus before I close, which is to take time to celebrate successes on the journey. As I've mentioned, we've really had some exciting moments, whether it was, helping a generic supplier achieve WHO pre-qualification, or methods being added to the USAID and UNFPA catalogs, more affordable pricing, increased supply. These are all incredible milestones. And just taking a minute to pause, and we've been talking a lot about pause and reflecting recently, but also pausing and celebrating. And in the era of the pandemic, that has been even more challenging, but finding opportunities to be together in person and or virtually, and taking a minute to pause again on lessons learned, certainly including challenges, but also on successes. So I will close there. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you very much to all the speakers for very inspirational talks. Can I remind those listening, if you want to pose a question, can you put it in the chat? And then we'll be able to address that when we come around to our round table. We're now going to shift to the next section of the round table. It's going to look into potential challenges and strategic enablers along the sort of product development to uptake continuum. So we're going to have Aditi Das, who's Business Development Manager, Technical and Regulatory Affairs at the Medicines Patent Pool. She's going to present on scaling up manufacturing capacity of novel HIV therapeutics. And then followed by Ray Corrin, who's a clinical assessor for the WHO Pre-Qualification and Medicines Program and an ILF member. And he'll present on regulatory pathways enabling access to long-acting formulations. And finally, then we'll have Wesley Kreft, a director of the global supply chain at I+ Solutions, and they're going to present on the elements enabling predictable and successful procurement of long-acting technologies. Aditi, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I am Aditi. I'm the technical and regulatory expert with the Medicines Patent Pool. In this session, I would mainly focus on the generic development of the novel long-acting HIV therapeutics. I'm thankful to the organizers for providing me the opportunity to share my thoughts with all of you on this topic. This slide provides a snapshot of the current trends in long-acting products for HIV, and as you can see here, different technologies and different routes of administration are being considered for formulating these long-acting products. Thus, the challenges that the generics are expected to encounter while developing these products will also be diverse and will need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Now, looking into the contents of the dossier for submission for the originator and the generics, we all know that the most important part of a generic dossier is the bioequivalence. because the generic actually relies on the bioequivalence data with respect to the originator product to establish the safety and efficacy of the generic product. Thus, the challenges that are encountered by the generics during development can be, classified into three major categories. One is the development and manufacturing challenges. The second is the challenges with respect to bioequivalence. And third is the regulatory challenges. So we'll elaborate on these challenges specifically in the next few slides. Coming to the development and manufacturing challenges. So the first thing that comes to the mind is, of course, the technical experience and the expertise, because the long-acting formulations are much complex than the simple generic formulations like oral solids or injectables. Thus, a substantial amount of expertise and experience is required to successfully develop these products. But one positive thing to note here is that over the last decade or so, there has been a considerable progress in long-acting formulations, especially in other fields like antipsychotic and hormones. So there are generic players who have these products, and this experience needs to be leveraged while formulating this new wave of novel HIV therapeutics. Another point to consider here is the availability of technology package from the originator, because though some of the information regarding the originator formulation is normally available in public domain, but there is always a knowledge gap, and the genetics normally need to do a lot of experimentations during their development phase to optimize the formulation. Thus, a technology package from the originator which contains information which are critical for development can really accelerate the generic development significantly. The next point to consider is equipment and infrastructure, and I think this is much more important in case of products wherein the long-acting properties of the formulation are achieved by adopting some niche formulation technologies. Say, for example, for cabotegravir, we all know that the nanosuspension technology has been adopted, wherein the mesh mill has been used to mill the active ingredient to get a desired particle size in the nanometer range. So these are again niche equipments and normally not available with the generics. Another example is the dapaverin ring, I think, which uses this technology of injection molding, which is also I would say a non-standard process. Such cases then to leverage on the common technologies used for other formulations. Say, for example, if we consider the nanomilling technology, then this has long been used for oral solid formulations, mainly to increase bioavailability. So there are many generic players who have this experience of developing oral solid formulations using the nanomill, and the same experience can be leveraged here. Another important point, I think, is for funding in case of specific capex requirements, because sometimes it is not commercially viable for the generics to invest in an equipment and to create a manufacturing suite for one specific product in their portfolio. So in such cases, I think some funding can help to create a suitable infrastructure for such products. The next point is with respect to the use of novel polymers or novel devices, because in many cases the originators use proprietary tailor-made polymers, which serves as the drug release rate controlling agent for the long-acting formulations. Now, sourcing these polymers then become critical for success for the generic developers. Dapaverin ring, I think, is an example wherein novel silicone-based polymers have been used. And such specific polymers are normally manufactured by a single manufacturer, and there can be issues in supply chain continuity as well in such cases. Thus, some support from the originator in sourcing and characterizing these novel polymers and devices can be really useful for the generics. Another point to remember here is, of course, the use of very strong and specific supplier agreements to maintain the supply chain securities in these cases. The last point that I wanted to highlight here is additional development considerations for oral lead-in formulations. Though of course we know that the generics are equipped to manufacture standard OSD formulations. However, this kind of adds an additional requirement in terms of development and bioequivalence. Coming to the bioequivalence considerations more specifically, so the first thing to keep in mind is, unlike some simpler products, biowaiver is simply not possible for long-acting products. And then just because these are long acting, obviously we know that the sampling times are going to be longer than the traditional B, so the B duration overall is long. Then there are a lot of complexities that are involved in the bioequivalence design, whether to follow a parallel design or a crossover design, single dose versus multiple dose, patients versus healthy volunteers, sometimes requirement of special populations or pediatric patients. Normally, these are products which have high variability, so number of subjects are also increased. There could be additional B requirements for the oral lead-in, as we said earlier. So all these things actually add up to the overall complexity of the bioequivalence study, increases the time and the cost associated with such studies. Now, one way forward here could be, of course, again, an originator tech pack support containing all important information, especially the PK data, which then can help the generics to develop an appropriate bioequivalence protocol. Another important thing could be the availability of the regulatory guidance for establishing bioequivalence. And this again requires some collaboration between the generics and the scientific advisory teams of regulatory authorities. Again, one important tool for development of long-acting formulations is IV-IVC, and lack of IV-IVC actually poses a great challenge for generic development, because normally generics use this tool for screening their formulations at the development phase. Thus, dedicated efforts from the originator and also from different expert groups and also the generics to build a good IV-IVC tool can definitely bring down the overall time required for development. A few points about the regulatory considerations for generics. So the first is, of course, the regulatory pathway for the generics. A well-defined regulatory pathway is important that helps the generics to devise their regulatory strategy earlier. So inclusion in PEPFAR or WHO PQ EOI promptly can help and promote the filing of the generic products. Timely availability of regulatory guidelines is also important. We were speaking about the B recommendations, but there are other technical guidelines, for example, product monographs or other recommendations, which might contain some valuable information which could help the generics in developing the product faster. And the last is regulatory capabilities in the LMICs. As we know that the competency of the regulatory authorities in LMICs to assess this complex dossiers might be a bottleneck at times. So we need to have initiatives to strengthen the regulatory capabilities of these LMICs so that they're equipped enough to assess this kind of dossiers. Promoting reliance and recognition of stringent regulatory authorities or WHO PQ can also help. And then in some cases, of course, originator can also support, and facilitate generic filing by providing some preclinical and clinical data package in some countries where, the generics are the first filers, basically. So, finally, I would like to conclude this presentation by saying that to promote acceptability and the affordability in LMICs, it is important to have the generic versions of long-acting HIV formulations. And as we have seen here, that diverse technologies are being adopted to achieve long-acting formulations. So obviously, the challenges faced by the generic manufacturers is going to be very, very specific to the product in concern. Thus, this objective of making these products available in LMICs is something that cannot be achieved only by the generics players alone. What is required is a strong collaborative effort from all stakeholders. Thus, the generics, the originators, regulators, policymakers, civil society, donors, funders, everybody should work, should come together and work hand in hand to make this happen. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ray Corin, clinical assessor for the WHO Pre-Qualification of Medicines program in Geneva. I'm going to provide today a brief regulatory perspective on one aspect of long-acting antiretrovirals. Next slide. I'll be talking about CAB-LA, long-acting cabotegravir. Next slide. Regulatory bodies do their work based in national and international legislation. They assure governments that safety, efficacy, and quality claims for a product are strictly justified by data provided by the manufacturer. Agencies are nation or region specific and go into fine details of a company's application. By definition, they deal with the data as submitted. By contrast, guidelines such as those authored by the WHO Global HIV Program, national public health authorities, and specialist societies may recommend things that are outside of the product label. This is based on their freedom to look at factors other than those that are related to the characteristics of the product itself. Sources for guideline writers are publications and expert interpretations. Traditionally, regulators and public health authorities who write guidelines rarely talk to each other, as real or perceived conflict of interest is a risk. This can and does sometimes result in clashes. Next slide. So I'll speak now about the WHO Pre-Qualification of Medicines program. Many of you are familiar with this. It was begun in 2001. It's a program which, after rigorous review, confirms that specific products meet unified global standards for quality, safety, and efficacy. Though WHO is not a regulatory body, PQ may be said to have a type of regulatory function. It provides quality assurance for key medical products, most often generics, purchased by UN agencies, national agencies, and international organizations. Next slide. The PQ team regularly provides advice to generic companies on design of bioequivalence studies. And a recent WHO pilot program called Coordinated Scientific Advice, CSA, is offering help to manufacturers on things like trial design. Next slide. In relation to long-acting HIV products, I'll speak now about innovators versus generics. Next slide. If an innovator sponsor wishes their product to be pre-qualified by WHO, the labeling as approved by the SRA, Stringent Regulatory Authority, is not altered. For generic manufacturers, however, the pre-qualification team creates new labeling in the summary of product characteristics and patient information leaflet, which aligns with current WHO guidelines. You may thus see things in the labels of generics that differ to a greater or lesser extent from SRA-approved originator wording. This relabeling allows for consideration of factors that may not have been in view at the time of the originator trials. It allows for priority to be given to the use of the product in the context of low and middle income countries, where things like temperature excursions, for example, may be more extreme. You may also see in labeling of pre-qualified products things like an indication for single dose prophylaxis once per year for an antiparasitic drug. This type of indication was never envisioned by the originator company for submission to a stringent regulatory authority. Next slide. So let's consider CAB-LA, which I think illustrates some of the thorny decisions faced by regulators and by guideline writers. To date, no manufacturer, innovator, or generic of a long-acting HIV injectable product has applied to WHO for pre-qualification. The EOI expression of interest document appeared on the WHO website in April of 2022. Long-acting cabotegravir, manufactured by the innovator sponsor, has until now received regulatory approval only from the US FDA. Approval was based on 2 large studies showing that Cab-LA was significantly more effective in both men and women than standard oral pre-exposure prophylaxis. The product labeling for Cab-LA, however, requires that complex and expensive nucleic acid testing be done both before drug initiation as well as at the time of every IM injection, i.e. every 2 months. This is obviously a rather onerous and cumbersome requirement. Next slide. The requirement came about because of a small number of unexpected events in the landmark HPTN-083 trial, i.e. masking of early infection by partial suppression of virus with cabotegravir monotherapy, significant delays in correct diagnosis of HIV, and consequent development of HIV viral resistance, potentially to the entire integrase inhibitor class. Though the risk of the delayed HIV diagnosis and ensuing occurrence of integrase inhibitor resistant virus in the study was not common, there were 7 cases of this type of pharmacological failure. The regulator in this case noted that there could be large consequences, including unwitting transmission of virus during a period where persons would be completely unaware that their virus is resistant. Next slide. In view of this, the regulator has required a post-approval commitment to capture data on resistance among participants who become infected during PrEP use or within 1 year of discontinuing PrEP. Also, as a result, more stringent NAT testing requirements were applied to labeling than had been previously recommended with oral PrEP with Truvada. This decision is arguable, but no decision has been firmly made on it by any guidelines body at this point. Next slide. The WHO Guideline Development Group is currently considering this issue, and a new version of the guideline will be released at the IAS 2022 meeting in July in Montreal. We shall see what they propose to do. In theory, an inexpensive pre-qualified generic product of Cab-LA could be labeled differently from the innovator. Next slide. One obvious thing that might provide relief, of course, would be development of rapid and cheap point-of-care nucleic acid testing. This isn't on the immediate horizon, but it's not out of the question. Thanks for your attention.
Good afternoon. My name is Wesley Crafts, and I'm going to highlight the procurement and supply chain elements as it comes to the introduction of long-acting technology. I'm co-chair of the ARV working group, and I'm speaking on behalf of the ARV working group in this capacity. So firstly, through the last over more than 10 years, the working group has been busy advising on commercialization and marketing circumstances for ARVs. And we've spotted a couple of important highlights which will be relevant as well for the long-acting injectables. So the first one is it's very critical that once the WHO guidelines have been launched, that within each country the guidelines are being updated and adapted in the country. The next phase is then to identify the demand, and specifically in some high burden countries. That will allow us to get a sense on the uptake, and it allows us to kind of commercialize the product with the suppliers. In most of the low and middle income countries, the registration of the product is a requirement. So together with the suppliers, we advocate to start the in-country registration process upon receiving the US FDA or WHO pre-qualification for the product. Then the next one is it's important to do a consistent and frequent updates on supply availability. So with a new product coming to market, there's that continuous balance between what is the demand and can we give long-term forecast versus what is the supply availability. By keeping each other and all the stakeholders updated on a regular basis, it will inform the market best. It will give the suppliers the comfort that demand is being created, is out there. And it also gives the countries the assurance that the supplier is in a startup phase, scale up of production, and supply will be coming, but the timing of it will be communicated on a regular basis. Then we've seen in the past that when a new product came to market, some countries that had budget available ordered immediately for 12 months. It's our advice that countries should order for ideally 3 months, a maximum of 6 months of supply. And that's for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it allows country to have a regular scale up and identify how the uptake is of the product. But it also gives more countries the opportunity to introduce the product, because normally, the initial supply is a constraint. Then it's very important to follow consumption and rollout to modify kind of the supply and the demand availability. Then some other elements around pooled procurement and supply chain management for specifically for long-acting injectables. So as mentioned, the countries are developing a bottom-up forecast. There's a coordination mechanism that links the demand and the available supply. So what we've seen in other products, the multiple buyers come together, have intel from a dozen of countries or even more, and that demand is compared to the available supply. And based on that, there's a coordination between the countries and the buyers, determining how can we best divide the available supply. There are a couple of pooled procurement initiatives that have been quite effective. The working group consists of members that manage pooled procurement as well. So specifically for new products coming to market, it's either very important to have a very tight coordination or to incorporate that product as part of a pooled procurement mechanism, which allows a single buyer and a single voice to both the countries and the suppliers. As mentioned before, communication is critical, and ultimately it's the sharing of information. So with the demand information available, it's important to do monthly or quarterly forecast information and disseminate that to the available supplier. And once generics come to market, it becomes even more important to keep the whole market informed about the available demands so they can plan their scale up and production cycles. Then lastly, we thought as a working group, how can the medicine patent pool further support the work? So firstly, it's obviously the more countries that can benefit from the license agreements, the bigger demand can be generated and more products can be made available at affordable prices. A potential cooperation on technology transfer to the generics, especially for long-acting, which is a relatively difficult product to make, as explained by the other speakers as well. And then trying to stimulate a centralized oversight on demand and supply. That can be through a working group like we are, can also be through other mechanisms, but to really stimulate that centralized overview. And then lastly, keep engaging generic suppliers to commercialize the product and to keep the product on the market. I will stop there and happy to answer any questions in the at the end of the roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you, Wesley, Aditi, and Ray, and some more really in-depth presentations there, which leads us to the last round of presentations before we go into the discussion. Two generic manufacturer speakers will join us now, who I'd like to introduce for some rapid fire perspectives. So today our speakers are Faiz Ahmed, who is the Assistant General Manager of Regulatory Affairs at Incepta Pharmaceuticals Limited. And then we also have with us Michael Deploy, who is an Associate Director who oversees portfolio objectives for Sub-Saharan Africa at Cipla. Over to you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Faiz Ahmed. I am working at Incepta Pharmaceuticals Limited. This is one of the leading pharmaceutical company in Bangladesh. Today I would like to discuss a little bit about our experience with a long-acting injectable, which is medroxyprogesterone acetate. So before going there, I would like to thank WHO, IAS, and NPP for letting us to share, welcoming us or inviting us to say something about our experience. So the product that Incepta have developed is called medroxyprogesterone acetate. This is a long-acting injectable contraceptive for females, and we think this is a very valuable contribution or valuable addition of this generic product to WHO pre-qualification list, because there are not so much generic available for this product. This is more affordable now and available toward a lot of places now, our generic. So this is very important. So I remember, in back 2010 or 11, we received fast, communication to a Geneva-based, research center, which is called Concept Foundation. They came to us and they asked us that we are willing to develop this product or not. So with their, this communication, our top management was prudent enough, and they understood the need for this kind of product, and they immediately agreed and fully committed to develop this product and allocate resource and human resource, all these things for this development of this product. So then the work started, and it takes a long time. It's not like immediately you can develop like tablet or capsule. So for long-acting injectables, it took almost like 4 or 5 years for us. And then in 2016, we are ready with the development of this product. So then we went for the B study, and it was a 150 subject B study. And you can understand it's a long-acting injectable. So, very challenging, because up to 140 days, we had to collect the blood, and, the clinical phase was that long. So we did the B study, and we are very fortunate that B study passed very nicely. And then we went for WHO PQ submission. So from 2017, we went for PQ submission, and the dosage evaluation and all those things happened. And then finally, we got approval in February 2020. So after getting the WHO pre-qualified from February 2020, then we started the in-country registration, and we mainly followed the CRP process. And now I think we are already, registered our product in almost like 20 plus countries, and we are exporting to a lot of countries along with Bangladesh. And this is a very important product that we believe that important for especially the female health. And this is we are also working with another product, which is sub-Q version of this product, and which will be self-injecting. We will empower the females more. And for this product, we are getting a lot of support, technical support from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, also the Children Fund, which is SIF, and also a lot of other development partners. So we are developing for that product, and we are hopeful that within 2024 we'll submit for that product. That is also long-acting injectable suspension for WHO-PQ. Now, regarding some challenge that we faced, actually, I think obviously this kind of product is very technologically challenged. Like, we have to look into a lot of parameters. So for our product, the pH, viscosity, PSD, all these things, and detailed studies on suspendability, and then syringeability, sedimentation volume test, this kind of thing were very much technologically challenged. And we are very fortunate that we received help from Concept Foundation, Gates Foundation, all this expert helped us, and then our scientists also were very expert, so we could manage those things. And also we did the stability in zone 4A, 4B, all those conditions. So we got the WHO qualification. And also another challenge I think was in B study. Definitely, it's a female subject only B study, and we have to long clinical timeline was there to take the blood samples, all those things. But mostly if you have the commitment from the top management, and we have that proper resource, and in terms of technology as well as human resource, I think. And obviously this kind of product takes time, so we have to be patient. We have to give the proper time to develop the product, so the process and product is robust enough. There should be no issue with the quality side, and then we can go for this product. So with this kind of exercise, if we do, we hope that from Incepta we'll get a lot of other projects, and we can prepare these generic versions of this project, and we can submit and can provide this kind of products to whole world. And we are a licensee of MPP. We have received another product sub-license from MPP. We are working on that product also. And from Incepta, we are working with number of products for WHO pre-qualification, this kind of public health products. So we hope this is a learning journey for us, and we hope we can collaborate to a lot of other projects with this kind of development partners, MPP, WHO, everyone, and we can contribute a lot. Thank you so much.
Good day, colleagues. My name is Michael Duploy, and I work with CIPLA. Today, I want to quickly talk to you about some of the complex long-acting injectable products that we have developed. By way of example, CIPLA has developed, filed, and secured approval of a complex long-acting injectable hormonal product. The stringent regulatory authorities that approved our product include the US FDA and Australian TGA. Our product is an AB rated alternative of the reference product, which means it's a generic with demonstrated bioequivalence over the indicated 3-monthly interval periods. This serves to establish our capabilities to develop and secure approval of bioequivalent long-acting injectables. Moreover, the development of further projects in other therapeutic areas with different durations of action have also been completed, and we are preparing the filings thereof with stringent regulatory authorities. Moreover, we have also successfully developed an injectable nanosuspension product, which is similarly approved by stringent regulatory authorities. We are advancing and combining our long-acting injectable and nanosuspension capabilities by developing long-acting injectable nanosuspension candidates, which are currently under development. I'd like to highlight 2 technical challenges that we feel deserve a mention. Firstly, in respect of biostudies. Long-acting injectables are generally in suspension, which means no opportunity exists to pursue a biowaiver. Secondly, in respect of scaling up. Now, the scaling up of complex processes, that is from research and development rather to production, is complicated by nanomilling. Particular attention must therefore be given to ensure that the required particle size can be achieved repeatedly in order to attain the desired in vitro release profile. I would like to highlight 4 regulatory challenges that we also feel deserve a mention. Firstly, in terms of CMC and bioequivalence, there are guidance gaps for scaling up commercial batches tenfold from exhibit batches. And there are also guidance gaps for adding alternate manufacturing sites. Secondly, in respect of biostudies, guidance gaps are unfortunately also in place for managing the recruitment of patients participating in longer studies, especially if these studies have a likelihood of high patient dropouts. Thirdly, in respect of in vitro analyses, there's a lack of available tools to demonstrate equivalence of test products with reference products due to the long duration of drug delivery. Lastly, in respect of modeling, there are guidance gaps and extensive data requirements for emerging technologies, including physiologically based pharmacokinetic modeling and statistical evaluation tools to demonstrate equivalence. Thank you.
Thank you. So without further ado, I'm delighted to say that we're going to go into the panel discussion. So I'm also very happy to introduce everyone. He doesn't need an introduction, but Mitchell Warren, the Executive Director of AVAC, is going to open and facilitate our panel discussion today. So thanks, Mitchell. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Helen and Anton and IIS and NPP for organizing this session and the whole series of discussion. We obviously have less time than I think all of us would like because there's a lot to discuss, as you will have all heard from these presentations. I am going to invite the panelists who are on the line to join us live. Thank you all for your video contributions. And as we begin, I do want to just flag something Anton said. This is obviously not a conversation and a set of questions we're going to resolve in the next 21 minutes. These are conversations that obviously we're all going to be discussing for a fair bit of time going forward, and want to draw people's attention to a number of sessions at the upcoming AIDS 2022 conference that Ray mentioned, where the WHO guidelines are planning to be launched, but also a number of conversations, including a satellite from IIS and MPP, and we'll get the details posted there in just a minute. But really want to thank you all. I believe a few others are coming on to screen, I hope, but we'll get started. I did want to pick up on something that I think it's where Michael just ended in terms of timelines. And I think, Ray, you mentioned it, a number of you mentioned it about the timelines. And I wonder, obviously every product is unique, but I'm wondering if any or all of you might be able to just give some illustrative views, because across all of the presentations, the period from licensing to generic manufacturing, the bioequivalency, if one of you might just want to take a whack at what are we talking about generally in terms of being able to see a generic get to market with a long-acting technology. So I wonder if one of you, Michael, you kind of described some of that just at the end, but I wonder if any of you want to try to provide an illustration of what to calibrate expectations for our next wave of products.
Hi, Mitchell. Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you very clearly.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hi, colleagues. My name is Michael. I'm from Cipla. We are based in Cape Town, so just to give some reference, to answer the question, Mitchell, as best as I possibly can, there are many moving parts. So I think we have to just mention that caveat first up. I think if the stars align and the right things happen that do open the gates in terms of further funding and also in terms of licenses that permit the commercial engagement, if I can put it like that. I think we are somewhere between 2 years to 3 years before we could really start getting some product that could not necessarily go to market, but you could have a product that could go to the regulator. I think that's when the stars align. I'm very open for anyone to put a different position forward, but I think the biostudy takes almost half of that time up. So in terms of scaling up and having confidence in the product and the profile that you could put towards patients, even if it's just for BOLAR perspectives or in terms of getting the necessary data, I think that's the expedited timeline. The warp speed, as we've sort of referred to in terms of COVID timelines. That's my guess, Mitchell.
Great, Michael, that's super helpful, because I know there are a lot of conversations out there with people's aspirations, and I think to calibrate this. Ray, I see you came off, and I was going to actually pick up on a timeline question for you, but go ahead and jump in if you can.
Sure. Yeah, I would just say that pre-qualification is a transparent process. We try to be, and the timelines for how much time is spent when an application arrives to when the product is pre-qualified, that is quantified every year. There's an output where at the manufacturer's meeting, we say, how many days were spent by the manufacturer, how many days were spent by pre-qualification, and the PQ time has been coming down over the years. I think the manufacturer time is as well, but not as much as the PQ time. So I would just say that we try to be transparent, that things don't sit on people's desks. There's a session with about 60 evaluators from many countries around the world that happens for a week every 2 months. Work goes on in between those sessions. So I think that being open about who's taking what kind of time. Of course, manufacturers have more things to deal with than pre-qualification, perhaps, because we're doing evaluations. But you can see whether there's progress or not on these annual outputs from WHO in terms of shortening the timelines that assessments take. And I think we've been reasonably good in bringing that time down in the last few years.
Great. Ray, that's super helpful. And I wanted to pick up, there was a question that came in that I saw related to something you said about the labeling. And you described that the innovator who presents is tied to the original labeling that might come from the initial regulatory approval, but then follow-on generics might have adapted labeling. And a question was, if when a generic comes in afterwards, does that updated label also apply then to the originator, or does the originator's label at first approval remain with it irrespective of what happens with the generic?
No, the originator label stays the same forever. Oh, well, not forever, until they change it.
Until they change.
The pre-qualification program changes the label according to what the current WHO guideline says. And so we've done sometimes minor and sometimes very major changes to labels. That recognize the fact that the product use is going to be, in many cases, quite different than it would be in a non-constrained setting. So the innovator label does not change, but the generic label does change, and it can change over time as well as new research comes in.
Great. And perhaps to state the obvious, I think all of us on this call are probably keenly aware and watching closely related to injectable cabotegravir and what happens with the labeling. As you said, the FDA label is quite specific, Ray, and we'll see what other regulators choose to do, and perhaps also obviously what WHO does with its guidelines. Aditi, I'm so glad I thought you were on, but I didn't see you. Welcome to the screen. There was a very specific question for you. You said something that was really important in terms of moving into generics but a question came up of IVC. If you could both explain about the role of that in vitro, in vivo, and why it's so important in the process.
Sure. I think for the generics, as I said, the heart of development is basically bioequivalence, right?
Aditi, if you could get a little closer to the microphone, a little hard to hear you.
Yeah, sure. So am I audible now? I think.
Yeah, that's better. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I guess for generics, I think it's like the heart of development is bioequivalence, right? Because the generics are actually, when they're developing the products, it's important for them to check the in vivo performance of their product with respect to the originator. Now, each time it is not possible for them to conduct an in vivo study to screen their population. So what they need basically is an in vitro tool, right? Some kind of an in vitro tool to screen the formulations, basically. Now, what happens is that since these are long-acting formulations, so to develop an in vitro tool which will give you some idea about the formulation in 2 to 3 hours, wherein the in vivo profile is of course 2 months or 3 months, say for example, and you are trying to shorten it to 2 to 3 hours in some kind of an in vitro tool is extremely challenging. Right. So that's where I think a dedicated efforts and expertise comes into place. And I guess Michael also, I think, explained the importance of certain modeling efforts there. Something like a PBPK model, say for example, a lot of work is going on with FDA nowadays on this, especially in the field of long-acting products, wherein there are physiologically based pharmacokinetic models. These are basically modeling approaches which allows you to fit in certain characteristics along with some in vitro data as well, and some in vivo data, and try to model in a way so that you can find what would be the expected in vivo profile. So I think this kind of tools can be extremely important for the generics for development of the products.
Great. Aditi, thank you so much. That's super helpful. Another issue that I think a number of you touched on, but a couple of questions came in about who gets to decide. So obviously, and I know we have a couple of generics as well as some innovators on the line, a number of generic companies exist. And I think in each of the various examples, people talked about, one or another of the generics that might actually be licensed to and then develop the generic formulations. And a question came in over who gets to decide which generic manufacturers. Is that something that sits, and I don't know if Rajesh is still on from MPP, but how much of that sits with the innovator to choose? How much is that of MPP negotiating and choosing the most appropriate generics? And how much of it is the generics saying, I really want to manufacture product X, and stepping forward. And I wonder, oh, I see a hand up, a real hand. Oh, you're on mute though, Sandra.
I'm a very conventional person, Mitchell, sorry. I'd like to raise my hand is to answer and tackle this question. So usually in a licensing process, what exists is what we call an expression of interest right after that is opened right after the execution of the license, meaning the day itself when the announcement gets out. Usually, and there's a questionnaire that is built together with the originator. So MPP and the originator works together to make sure that we cover in the questionnaire everything that is kind of a virtual due diligence to make sure that the reviewing panel, which is a blinded reviewing panel composed of experts and internal and external, will be able to get all the information that makes sure that there's all the capability, capacity, and willingness of this potential partner to be to become an MPP slash whatever molecule it is, and originator, generic manufacturer. So there's this panel. Then we together. So there's an evaluation, a scoring grid, and then this is decided jointly with the originator based on the questionnaire. So the expression of interest is open to everyone, every generic manufacturers who want to apply, and then the selection criteria is applies to the ones leading to a natural selection. So far things have been, and we have 55 of them. So the process runs quite smoothly and hand on hand with the originator. The willingness of the generic, the completeness with the questionnaire and MPP. Stop.
Great. That's super helpful, Sandra. Do you just want to introduce yourself? Because I don't know that everyone on the line knows you.
Oh, sorry for this. I'm Sandra Norbrand. I'm heading the business development department at MPP.
Fantastic. That's why we knew you were the right person to answer the question. Incredibly helpful. And now I forgot my next question. I was going to, one of the things that maybe picks up a bit on that, timing is everything, obviously. And I think Rajesh, who I think is maybe off the line now, but was describing a number of licenses, some of which happen when products are still in earlier development. And he described particularly the TLD long-acting, which is not yet proven safe and effective, but a license made. And then he described the licensing negotiations currently underway between ViiV and MPP about cabotegravir, which is clearly safe and effective and actually already approved by a stringent regulator. Can one of you, and I don't know if that's back to you, Sandra, or DT, someone from MPP or elsewhere on the panel, describe the nuances about timing and the benefits or challenges of those early license agreements versus once a product is already in market? Feel free to jump in, whomever.
I'm happy to go. I just don't want to monopolize. So the access meaning in our terms and the early access means that we can shorten the people having access in low middle income countries compared to high income countries. So if you go when the commercialization already started in the high income countries, meaning that we have let's say in a long acting even more complex and lengthy project that can go up to 5 years, meaning that people in low middle income countries will access the product with perhaps a 7-8 years gap compared to the high income countries one. So the early we start, of course, this is the process of manufacturing generics, everything will be done on the right time. But the earliest we start the negotiations, the short and the smallest this gap will be. And I think this is all around this call, what we want is equitable and simultaneous access for everyone in this world.
Great, thanks so much. Wesley, I wonder if I can turn to you. The issue of kind of understanding as I think the predictable market size, and on the one hand, with antiretroviral treatment, we largely know the denominator. whether that's people who are already on treatment or people who might be newly diagnosed. We know the denominator, we know the overall market need. Prevention obviously is everybody else who's uninfected, but that's obviously not a market. And I'm curious how you and your colleagues are thinking about a prevention market. I think it's safe to say we still don't really understand the PrEP market for oral PrEP. We now are a decade next week of the first stringent regulatory approval there. And I don't think we still know what the true oral PrEP market is. So how do all of you working in this ecosystem, looking at a sustainable market, think about a market where the denominator's either, huge and not necessarily the market, or somewhat unknowable at initial launch, and then plan for it?
No, and that's a very interesting question, and one we often debate. I think there are a couple of parameters which we try to use. Firstly, more and more of the international donor funding sets aside funding for prevention. So from that number, you can kind of calculate how many, at least, funding will be available for prevention, and then determine among the different preventative measures how that kind of percentage split might look like. So that's kind of a public sector approach to, there's only so much funding available, so that's what you have to kind of use. And then I guess a bit more in the lower middle income or middle upper income countries, where there are studies around private sector buying behavior of people and what's the price breakthrough. So once we have kind of a price indicator and we know what the population in those countries are willing to pay for prevention, you can basically model that out on top of the public health kind of donated products. What's then left out is almost the government funded components, which you can add, for example, South Africa. As we know, they have a huge domestic contribution, but in many of the other countries, that's quite limited. So you can basically populate it out. If the government contribution to the public health HIV program is 20%, you can assume that they will also kind of make a similar amount as the donor available for prevention. It's quite a lot of assumptions put in together. I think what we always advocate for, be as transparent as possible on the assumptions you make, because the suppliers will have their own modelers and their own people that have a good understanding on the market. So if you present the assumptions transparently, then many of the suppliers will know what to do and how to interpret those to come up with the potential market size.
Great, really, really helpful. Kate, I'm so glad you're back on screen. I was going to ask you a question because, we think a lot, obviously, about innovators, and often from either large pharma or biotechs. Obviously, in both HIV and in reproductive health, we've seen both those companies, but also nonprofit product development partnerships, whether that's IPM developing a vaginal ring for HIV prevention, or various contraceptives being developed by the Population Council, FHI itself, etc. I'm curious, as you reflect on these issues, and particularly about the multi-method platform, we also have multiple different types of innovators. And I'm wondering if you have any lessons about issues that might teach us related to developers who are both not-for-profit and for-profit, and if that has made any difference in some of the times to market and times to building that robust multi-method marketplace.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mitchell, for that question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So thanks for that question. I think it's a really important one. So one thing that's really interesting also in the contraceptive space, I think regarding the sort of pharma model, is I think the Medicines 360 organization, which actually has we partner with them, but they're not affiliated with FHI 360, but they're a nonprofit pharma. And so they've actually brought a second quality assured hormonal IUD to both the market domestically in the US, but also to global markets. And so the nonprofit pharma model is really interesting in Medicines 360 as an interesting example of that. And one thing to just say also is, I know that we've sort of already touched on this in various ways, but just to, of course, note that for long-acting contraceptives, we've had to go through full clinical trials. So there isn't, like there would be for a short-acting method, there isn't a generic pathway. And so both for contraceptive implants and for hormonal IUDs, the second suppliers have had to go through full clinical trials, so they technically aren't generics. And so that's been, a time-consuming part of the process for introducing quote unquote generic methods in the long-acting space, which again, may have relevance for this conversation as well. So, and I would check out the Medicine 360 partnership. Yeah, I think that's that they're an interesting group, and they may be an interesting partner to talk further about with this space. So thanks for that question.
Great. No, thank you. And it is a fascinating time. We have Medicines 360, of course, IPM with the vaginal ring, the TB Alliance brought to market a part of a new TB treatment regimen. So we are seeing the evolution of these product development partnerships after decades of engagement. So really great. I know we're just short of time, and I'm soon going to get the hook from Anton and Helen, but I do want to just maybe throw one last thing as we think about the way forward, and again, there'll be a number of conversations at IAS and beyond, because this is such a hot time in these conversations. One language check, it's so interesting as a group at AVAC, where we work in HIV, but also in reproductive health. Long acting is in the eye of the beholder. What we are talking about as long acting with a monthly ring and a bi-monthly injection would not even pass the laugh test of long acting in the contraceptive marketplace, where we look to truly longer acting. Even the 3-month DMPA is not considered a long-acting method in that realm. So it's an important language check, not just for us, but for potential users. And I just wanted to flag that. But given a real focus on how we go faster, I wonder if any of the panelists want to quickly, in 10 seconds, just say, is there a thing that we as a community could be doing to speed up the process, and thinking particularly about injectable cabotegravir for both prevention and treatment? Is there something that we as a global community could do right now to make this happen faster? Any panelists want to take a quick, Michael, please.
I've taken Sandra's conventional approach in doing the human hand. From my side, from our side, getting a license unlocks a lot of doors. It opens development, it releases funding, it mobilizes resources. So if we want to talk expediting processes, that's the hat that I want to throw into the ring, Mitchell, so to speak, is expediting licensing.
Great. Anything else from anybody? All right, expediting processes. I think that's a great way to end, or at least end this conversation, which is obviously just the beginning of many more things to do. Anton, you're on a screen, I see. Great to see you. And I think I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Warren, for a wonderful, wonderful job. And thanks to all the speakers and everybody that's online for a great seminar that we've had. I mean, I think I just wanted to wrap up by saying we're at the vanguard of this long-acting journey. So I think everything we do now will put things in place for the new products that are coming on. And I can understand that some companies may want to wait a little longer before they invest in some of the early long-acting and wait for the things that are coming online later on. But I really think that some of the conversation we had today has given us some fantastic insights about where we should be going especially with the development and procurement. So I just wanted to mention a few points that, as I said in the beginning of the session, the presentations, the guest ones were recorded and they'll be available by the IAS staff in the coming weeks. Minutes of the round table will be shared with the participants, with all of you guys. So we'd be grateful also if you could spare a couple of minutes to fill in a survey that was posted in the chat. Hopefully it's there now by the IAS colleagues. Just let us know what you think. And also we hope to see you in the upcoming AIDS 2022 satellite. We'll look at this topic of access even more. So if for those of you in Montreal or online in Montreal, we look forward for you to joining there. Again, I'd like to thank my co-chair, Helen, for Nelly and the team for putting this on, for all our panelists and speakers for wonderful talks, and for you all for listening. Thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.
Cheers all. Thank you.